screen. Everybody could see my screen, right? Everybody? Okay. So, welcome to Bootcamp Prep, okay? So basically, I'm just going to go over a little bit about the course itself and what you guys will be doing quickly, and then we're going to jump right into the next workshop, which will be loops. So, Bootcamp Prep, can you guys, if I present, can you guys still see my screen? Like this? Yeah, right? I think you can. It's just loading. Yeah, you guys can still see that, right? Okay, cool. So let me try to minimize this. So basically, our course topics will go over like this. We'll have introduction, which I'm doing now, plus tidy code, and then loops and debugging. This we will do before our lunch break today, and then after our lunch break, we will do coercion and truthiness. Okay. And then tomorrow we will be doing scope in the beginning of class, and then after our lunch break we will be doing arrays 1, and then we'll do arrays 2 on Monday, objects on Tuesday, object methods on Wednesday, pass by value, pass by reference on Thursday, and then higher order functions 1 and 2 will be Saturday next week, and then recursion 1 and 2 will be Sunday next week. And this will be 14 is kind of, since this is in a week, this will be on your own. Okay? And I'll get to that later in this. Whoops. So basically, what I really want all of you to do is to watch the pre-recorded lectures in LearnDot. So when I say LearnDot, I mean mean uh, I mean this, right? This is LearnDot, right? So this is going to be my version because I'm an instructor, but so this would be your thing, right? And you have access to all of these workshops, right? So I've already preset all of these to pre-reading. So because it's a week long, I figured you guys could just jump into pre-reading all of these if you want. And there's going to be pre-recorded lecture videos, okay? So you guys, I think all of you should do that. It's beneficial. If you don't have time, that's fine. But I do know that since everybody's on quarantine, then I feel like everyone has a lot of time right now. So I definitely recommend doing the pre-recorded lecture, right? So also attend the interactive lecture. That's required. That's what we're doing right now. And you work on the workshop with your partner, which is required. You guys will be partnered into groups. I'll separate you into different Zoom rooms, and then you'll be working on workshops together. You could share your screen with the other person and work on things together, okay? Then after the workshop's done, I will be posting solutions in LearnDot over here, and then we will be there will also be review videos in those solutions and things like that. And I really recommend you do that too. That's really how you get the most out of the course, okay? Um Right. So workshops are not intended to be finished. That's important. You guys will be very stressed out when you're doing the workshops, but don't worry, they're designed to be challenge you, and they're not really intended for you to finish them. You will be randomly paired with a partner for each workshop you do, and then instructors will be available via the help desk. So back to here, back to here, you see this button right here. I can make a question here and say like, hey, I have a question. And then you post it and you say what cohort you're in or whatever, and then somebody will come in and help you. Okay? So, all right. Right. Okay. Add your pictures to LearnDot so instructors can help find you. I guess that's not really that important since everyone's remote right now. So workshops will be pair programming. So pair programming is basically when two programmers are sharing the same computer, and there's two roles, right? There's a driver and a navigator. So what the driver will be doing is the person who is actually going to be writing the code, right? So they write the code while the navigator is going to be planning and telling them what to write without actually writing it themselves. So what you would do is you would either switch every 10 minutes or switch after each problem. It's up to you guys. If you want to work on your own, like both type at the same time, it's honestly up to you. This isn't like a fully like like a fully you don't have to do it if you don't want to. So at Full Stack, we switch partners for every workshop, and this actually does mimic the actual boot camp. Okay. Um, why use pair programming at boot camp prep? Shouldn't I practice on my own? A lot of people do come up to me and say like, hey, why do I have to do this if I'm more comfortable working on my own? Well, teaching to learn is actually a central aspect of Full Stack's instructional philosophy, right? You learn a lot more when you're teaching the subject yourself. This is a fact, okay? And if you're not familiar with something and you're teaching it, then that will only strengthen your core understanding, right? And communicating about code is just as, if not more, important than actually writing it. So like when you're on the job, when you're an actual developer, an actual software engineer, you're not going to be working by yourself. You're going to be working in teams of sometimes like 30 people, right? So if you're writing something or you see a problem with something that someone else is writing, if you can't properly communicate that, then everybody will just ignore you and then your voice will never be heard, right? So you have to know how to speak about code. You have to know how to communicate. Solving problems with a partner is the best way to prepare for an admissions interview at a top boot camp. Also, interviews for jobs. Most top boot camp grads. Prepare programs, just text editors, just like Google Docs, and true remote people have real-time access. Right. So basically, like pair programming, yeah, you would use a text editor. However, our workshops are going to be in a website called CodePen, which everyone will have the same link to. So you can't actually type in the same screen, but you can share each other's screen, and the person who's sharing their screen, they'll be the ones that driving, and the other person that doesn't have access to the screen will be the navigator. If that makes sense. Okay. So let's see. We're not going to do the icebreaker since this is a remote. You guys are saved, so don't worry about that. So in this class, we will have 2 optional projects that you can do. They're 100% optional. I don't care if you do them, but I really recommend that you do them because it's just a great opportunity to build larger programs, right? So if you want extra practice and you're not struggling, then I definitely recommend that you do it. If you don't have enough time during the week, LearnDot will be open for all of you after you're done, okay? You will have access to all of the workshops after you're done. So, if you don't have time during this week, do it after, okay? It's great practice, trust me, okay? Practice assessment. So there will be 2 practice assessments, okay? One will be taken in class. Well, no, okay, sorry. Since this is a week, what happens is after I'm done teaching the Recursion 2 class, right? After we're done here, after we're done with this, then that's it. Then I open up the last workshop and you do that on your own, okay? And a practice assessment, that workshop will count towards nothing. It will count if you do well, great. If you do bad, doesn't matter. It's used for extra practice, okay? Because the practice assessments and the assessment to actually get into full stack is in a different environment than what you are going to be in when you're doing the workshops here. Like you'll be doing the workshops in something called CodePen, but the test is actually in something called HackerRank, okay? And also you'll have a 75-minute time limit, okay, to do this. So that's also adding pressure. And then after that practice assessment, after you do that, and after the class is done, you will be emailed a link to practice assessment 2. Now, practice assessment 2 is a little different because If you fail that, it's still fine. Full stack won't look at it, it's fine. But if you pass that, then that actually counts as your first round application. So if you pass the second practice assessment, you will get a second round interview with full stack. The second round will be a video chat interview with an admissions person from full stack. Does that make sense? Dope. All right. So basically, if you guys have any questions about that, just let me know. It wasn't hacker rack, it's hacker rank. So hacker rank. So yeah. So full stack community values. Obviously, be patient with yourself as well as others. So obviously, you hear people saying be patient with others, but you have to be patient with yourself as well. Okay, because the things that you're going to be learning if you're new to computer science are going to be very difficult and you're going to have to think in a different way. Okay, so be patient with yourself. Okay, ask questions for me, even if they're dumb. Okay, trust the process and be on time. Help everyone and teach everyone. If like help everyone. And we like to have fun and be mindful of subtle isms like sexism, racism, ageism. We have a no asshole policy here. You are each other's most valuable research source, and no suitable for work content. So basically, just be like a normal person. You know what I mean? Like, don't you know what I'm saying? Um, yeah, there we go, Darius. There we go. So what's this? Okay. So we have some remote values. Please have your camera on. If you don't, I can understand if you're. I can't understand if you're confused or not. I also am terrible at lecturing a class of inanimate black squares. It's day one. I get AV problems happen. Please try to sort them out as soon as possible. Webcams are like $10 on Amazon. Please keep your mic off when you're not talking to me or a classmate. I love interruptions for questions, but I don't like listening to your dog bark or you eat food. Please wear clothes. Don't show up just wearing pants. If you really like being naked, I'm going to have to back up and revoke Rule 1 for you. Okay? Try to bring some enthusiasm to this class. It's a weird modern thing to do remote classes, and it can be hard to make them feel human, thus the video camera thing. So please try to talk and emote. Please don't exit the Zoom room before breakout rooms. This makes it really hard to pair you with a paired programming partner. Don't exit the Zoom room when I'm done, okay? When I'm done with the lecture, stay in the Zoom room. I'm going to make breakout rooms, and I'm going to put you in a breakout room with your partner, okay? So now we'll talk about why JavaScript. So JavaScript is actually the most popular language in the world, and most of the web is actually written on it. So our curriculum at FullStack teaches JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and a little bit of SQL. So these are very core languages. Like SQL is very important for databases, HTML and CSS is very important for building out actual web pages, and JavaScript is what's making them work behind the scenes, okay? So JavaScript is popular because pretty much it powers the majority of web applications, like I said before, right? So anything that can be written in JavaScript will eventually probably be written in JavaScript, especially on the front end. So runs almost any, and now because of the introduction of something called Node, now full stack JavaScript can run anywhere on the full stack. So web browsers, and it can also run on servers. So that's very important now. And also the first 7 out of 10s of JavaScript is relatively friendly. So basically, yeah, so JavaScript is pretty popular, right? So there's these things you'll be hearing me say ES5, ESNext. So ES5 and ESNext are different versions of JavaScript, right? So as you see the function keyword, that's ES5. But in ES6 or ESNext, ES6, you can actually write a function like that, which you'll see me do a lot, okay? I write functions like this most of the time. JavaScript versions are backwards compatible, and older features do work in newer environments. Newer environments may not work in older environments, though, so be wary of that. We do teach ES6. Immersive programs continuously update to cover the latest JavaScript features. Bootcamp Prep program covers some new features too, but only those that are helpful, okay? So we won't be going into depth of newer features, okay? Yeah, so ES5, there was a way to define a variable using the var keyword, right? But now, like, we could do like var hello equals world. But this, don't use var ever, right? Don't use this. Instead, we would do let goodbye equal world, okay? Also, you can do const. Right? So the difference between these two is if I can do like goodbye is now going to be equal to goodbye. It's not going to be equal to example. Okay? So you know the difference. And if I console.log goodbye, what we get is example, right? So I changed the value here. But if I try to change world, I get an error, okay? Because you're trying to assign a constant variable. If you define a variable with const, you can never reassign this. So there's that, okay? Zoom thing, oh, you got some of that. Okay, getting the most from this course. So complete the bootcamp prep pre-work curriculum first, do the pre-readings, and watch the pre-recorded lectures, okay? Enjoy the productive struggle. This is going to be hard, but try to enjoy the fact that you're facing a difficult task and you're trying to, completely alter your life in a really big way. Ask for help when you need it, otherwise what's the point, right? Don't look at the solutions until you've given problems an honest try. Honestly, that's how you get the most out of it. Like, don't just look at solutions. You have to really try before. Like, don't kill yourself over these problems, but if you haven't really given like a good, honest try, then just don't look at the solutions. Really try. Go back and finish unfinished workshop problems and finish them when time permits. Watch solution videos, even for problems you think you got right, and then review solution code. Okay? So now we'll just do quickly some tidecode tips. So why write tidecode and what is tidecode? So tidecode is essentially like, here's something we'll be talking about later, right? So let me just comment all of this out. So so this is a for loop, right? So as you can see here, I have, and then this is what we'll be doing in our loop workshop, right? So basically what I'm saying is I'm going to loop the code that is inside of this block, and I'm going to start I at 0. I'm defining something called I, setting it equal to 0, and then I'm saying I is less than 5. This middle statement means like, as long as I is less than 5, we keep looping. If this is no longer true, then we stop looping. Then I++ means at the end of our code block, when we're done with this line, done with the last line, when we reach over here, right? Then we add 1 to I. I++ is sort of like I plus equals 1, which is sort of like which I plus equals 1 is equal to I equals I plus 1. Okay? So this is shorthand for this. Okay? This is sort of shorthand for this because it's only 1. Okay? So when I say tidecode, can I write it like this? Something? Sure. I can, it still works, but this is really, it becomes impossible to read, right? Like, tidecode means following certain indentation rules and spacing rules, okay? So, rule of thumb, whenever you see a code block like this, or like Whenever you see code blocks, right? Code blocks are defined by these curly braces. So anything that goes inside of this code block, like this for loop, has a code block, right? Anything inside of it should be tabbed over one space. And then on their next line, on line 14, we have an if statement, a conditional statement. This if statement also has a curly brace. So that means inside of this if statement is another code block. So everything inside of this if statement should be tabbed over one space. Tabbed over once, right? Or two spaces. Does that make sense? So like, and then the closing curly brace should be in line with where the if is, like this, right? And this console is in line with the if because it is not inside of the if block, it is inside of the for loop block. So it's tabbed over once from the for loop. And then this closing bracket ends here. Okay? So this is what I mean by tidy code. Indentation. It's actually very important. It's not like some nonsense that I'm trying to get you to do, right? It's professional. It means you're no longer a beginner, that you're writing nonsense code. When you're in your own engineering team with all your teammates and you write shitty code, then no one's going to like working with you. Hell, you're not even going to get a job if you show up in a job interview and show like this nonsense code, right? Everything, there's industry and professional standards that you have to abide by. So engineers spend a lot more time reading and debugging code than actually writing it. This is very, very true. And it's very easy to debug code that's written neatly. Code should be beautiful, right? So that's why I do it. So indentation, so you indent one level inside of every code block. Code blocks start with a curly brace and end with a curly brace. So as you see here, we have a, oh shit. As you see here, we have function, amazing function, right? So now we're inside the code block. If true, console.log, this function is amazing. Outside the code block, outside the function block. And we see that this function is amazing here, right? But as you can see, this is indented one space, right? Well, it's indented one tab, right? Because it's inside of this block. And since this console log is inside of this if block, this is tabbed over one from the if as well. And so on and so forth. You can have a chain of blocks. So your code should kind of look like that, right? Also, let's talk about variable naming. So when we use variables, when we make variables, we as humans are making them ourselves, right? So JavaScript's naming standards default to camel case. So as you can see, the words my favorite place, they're three separate words, right? But we want that to be one variable name. Since they're three separate words, you lowercase the first word always, and then you capitalize the beginning of the next words, right? So F and P are capitalized here. Also, don't use ambiguous variable names like let X. Like, there's a bunch of people that like doing like let X, let R, let C, let J, like all these things throughout their functions, and then it just becomes impossible to realize what these variables are holding. You should really name your variables depending on what kind of value they're holding. Like current temp, current temperature, 68. And it's okay to use short variable names as counters, like in a for loop, right? So I did let I, right? Because let I would be like let index or let iterator, okay? But we say let I because we could just access I easily down below. How's everybody doing? No, any questions so far? Because I'm gonna get started on loops. Yeah, you have to unmute yourself, Steve.
I have one question.
Yeah, sure.
So I missed a little bit of the presentation at the beginning. Do we get a copy of that PowerPoint?
It should be in LearnDot under like the first workshop. There should be kind of when I open the workshop, there should be like a materials section. So
It's up there.
you should be. Can you find it already?
Yeah, if you went to Bootcamp Prep Introduction and Tidy Code, it's there, and you can start workshop.
Okay, cool. So
Yeah, I looked at that workshop yesterday. It just didn't have like the format of the course and stuff like that, like the pair programming and stuff like that.
oh,
If
it
you go to
doesn't.
Materials tab in it, it does. if there's any PDFs.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
If you still can't find it later, we'll work something out. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure, Steve.
Can you talk a little bit about when you use a semicolon in Tidecode?
Yeah, sure. So semicolons. Here, let me share my screen again. So semicolons are kind of like, everyone can see my screen, right? So like, I would use a semicolon here and here. You don't put them after blocks. You put them after statements.
And what does that do?
I'm going to be honest with you. You can actually omit semicolons. In JavaScript, you can omit semicolons because I think there's like 2 cases or 3 cases where they are actually important, but I never put semicolons. However, it depends, like, you might be thinking, well, what's the point? It actually is, it looks neater because it shows, what they do is, I think they signify like the end of a line, right? The end of like a statement. So you would put them after statements. So what I do, like in my company, semicolons are industry standard. Like we need those in all our code. So I just configured my text editor. When I save a document, it just adds semicolons everywhere, you know? So I never write them, so, you know. But if you want to, go for it. Any other questions?
Yeah, hi, I have a question. So like you mentioned that we should listen to pre-recorded lectures sort of before every class. Just because like I don't think there was a clear breakout of what we're doing for each day. Will you be able to let us know at the end of the session every day, like kind of what we should be listening to after?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So,
Okay.
like, there's going to be an hour break for lunch. Do you guys have the schedule for today?
I don't think so.
Okay, I think it's at 1.
Okay.
It might be at 12. I'll get back to you guys. I'll post in the Slack when I know after the lecture. But like for that, after lunch we'll be doing coercion, and then tomorrow we'll be doing scope and arrays.
Right.
So if you want to do that just for tomorrow, and I'll let you guys know what we're doing the next day if you want.
Yeah, I think I'm asking because like I just want to make sure I know what pre-record, like you know, like after today at 5 p.m. Right? I just want to know what pre-recorded lectures that I should be listening to tonight to prepare for tomorrow's class.
For sure. Okay, yeah.
Right, and because like all that is just on the platform and there's no breakdown of what we're doing what day, it'd be helpful if you can just.
Okay, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I can just post in Slack. I'll be like, hey, everyone, tomorrow's scope, like, do this. You know?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
I actually set them all available though. So by all means, if you get bored and you want to see what we're doing throughout the week, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. But that would be helpful to let us know what the bare minimum is.
Yeah, for sure.
One more question. Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, sure.
You mentioned that we were going to use CodePen. If we tried to do the visual code and do all that downloading and stuff, are you just advising since we're online to use CodePen, or should we still try to do that?
If you want to use the Visual Studio Code, go for it. People usually have problems installing all the packages and stuff, and it might be hard to work with your partner if they didn't do that. So if you want to do that, go for it. But CodePen, everyone's going to be using CodePen.
Okay.
But definitely check out Visual Studio Code, even if you're not going to use it, just to play around with it. Because Visual Studio Code is the editor I use for work, so it's like, I don't know, it's just good. Darius, did you have a question? Yeah.
Well, not a question, more of a statement. If you go to your Learn page and click the first lecture, it says Intro and Tidecode. It has the course itinerary on PDF for both the month class and the week class. So it'll show the course overview and the schedule and the presentation we just saw. So that way we can keep track of the lecture, because I know you had a question about it, Fu. That's it, yeah.
Okay, I'll take a look. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, so if there's no more questions, I guess I'll go on to loops. Just so everyone knows, there is a workshop for Tidecode, but since this is a week course, I'm not going to break you guys out and do that. Okay, you do that on your own. It's very easy. It's just, you'll see. Definitely do it, but we're not gonna, I'm not gonna make pairs for that. Okay. So let's get started. Okay. All right. So now we're going to talk about loops. So everybody sees this platform, right? Everyone sees what I'm doing, right? This is REPL.it. REPL.it is great to play around. I use it all the time, okay, if I'm playing around with code. Because you have your code here, you press the run button and it runs and you see what it does over here, okay? So just letting you all know. So we're going to be talking about two kinds of loops, okay? So we're going to be talking about a while loop and a for loop, okay? So a while loop has three parts. The while keyword is required, right? Space, open parentheses, space, open curly brace, enter. This is the general foundation of a while loop. What you put inside here, inside of the parentheses, is the condition for the while loop to keep looping over the code block, okay? So if I have something out here like let I equals 0, while I is less than 5, console.log, what is I? Okay? What do you think will happen when I click run? Nothing good. It will go on forever. This is what we call an infinite loop. Why? Why is this happening? Why is this going on forever? So we say while I is less than 5. Okay. So console.log, what is I? So what is I? I is 0. Then what do? We loop. Console.log, what is I? I is still 0. We have to change what I is, right? So we do I will now be equal to I minus 1, right? So what does this do? Oh no. I went the wrong way. I plus 1. Well, let me clear this. It's a mess. So now we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And I can do that, or I can do plus equals. Same thing. And since we're using 1, we can do plus plus, right? So the while loop requires three things pretty much. It requires this while keyword, it requires a conditional statement, and it requires some way to break it, okay? So what if I just put in, but I don't need this. I don't need this here, right? Well, I mean, I don't need to, like, make my statement based off of this, right? Like, I can do while true. And while true, this will run forever, right? But then I can do, like, if I is equal to 5, break. So what this does, the break keyword breaks out of the loop. As you can see, it behaves the same way, even though I'm putting in true in the while loop. Does that make sense? I was not defined. No, wait, it was. It needs to limit eyes. Okay. So basically, this is like basic behavior for while loops, right? So just to iterate again, once we enter the while loop, once we go past line 25, all of the code inside of line in between line 26 and line 30 will run over and over again until this condition is no longer true. However, since I put the value true in here, that means this will run forever. However, I'm incrementing I out here, and I'm saying, okay, well, if that I is ever 5, let's break out of the loop. And that's what the break keyword does, right? It breaks out of the loop. Okay? So those are while loops, and now let's go back to what I was talking about with for loops before, okay? So for is a little different. For see, like, with while loops, you can sort of forget to do this, and you have to manually do this, right? Like, later. Like, you write all of your logic in your while loop, and then you have to remember to increment I or do something to change this condition to make it false, right? In for loops, you do all of this in the beginning with 3 parts. So what happens with a for loop and they're separated by 2 semicolons. This is important. This is syntax, okay? You need these semicolons. So basically, the first thing that happens is the declaration. So I said let I equal 0. So this happens before the loop starts. Then, and it only happens once. This only happens once, right? This declaration of this variable. Then, before each iteration, so before each time we loop, so we'll just console.log I, right? So before each iteration, we will check what is in the middle here. So we will check to see if this is no longer true. So I is less than 10, let's say, right? So if I is ever 10 or more, this will no longer be true, right? Because if it's 11, 11 is not less than 10. That's not true. And if it is 10, 10 is not less than 10. 10 is 10, right? And then, so we do check that before we run each loop. And then, at the end of the block, we do something. We increment I, okay? Does that make sense? So now if we do this, we'll get 0 to 9. If we wanted to get that 10, we would just do I is less than or equal to 10. And this is, you don't have to do this like this, right? You can do like I is equal to 5, I plus equals 37, and go until I is that, right? So then we'll get all these numbers. Like, you can write these rules however you want them, okay? What loops are usually used for is, like, let's say I have a string. Let hello equal hello world. Okay? So what if I said I wanted to log out all of the characters in this string, right? What we would do is we would loop through the string. Because here, if we console.log hello at 0, we would get H, right? The letter H. That's because strings are made up of indexes, right? So at index 0 is this H. At index 1 is this E. At index 2 is this L, right? So indexes in strings start from 0 and go till at the end. So if we do like console.log hello.length, we get 11, right? But if we do console.log hello at 11, that'll be the D, right? No, it will not be. Because the indexes start at 0. Because the indexes start at 0, the last character will always be at .length minus 1, okay? And that's how you always get the last character, right? And if you ever try to access something in a string that doesn't exist, like at index 40, right? What we get is always going to be undefined, okay? Does that make sense? Any questions? Post in the chat. I don't see anybody. Well, I guess I can see everybody. Yeah. Any questions? No? Dope. All right, cool. So, let's see. Okay, so let's say I wanted to loop through all of these words, right? All of these letters, excuse me. So I would do like let I, and what should I set I as, right? I should be 0, because I want to start at the beginning. So that's why we usually set I to 0. Don't get into the habit of setting I to 0, though. Sometimes you will need I to be at a different place. However, if you know you want to loop through a string or an array from start to finish, you're probably going to be starting at 0. Then we're going to say I is now less than hello.length. That means, like I just showed you, hello world had a length of 11, right? So once I is 11, we want to stop. Because if we try to access hello at 11, we'll get undefined. We want one before that. That will be the last part of our loop, right? So I is less than hello.length, semicolon, I plus plus. We'll increment I each time. Now we'll console.log hello at I. And what we get here, hello world, right? What if I don't want the else? There's something I can do in the beginning. I can make an if statement, for sure. And I could say like if hello at I is not equal to L, then I could console log that, right? But what if I just said if it is equal? If it is equal to L, there's another keyword I can use. It's called continue. So what continue does is if this if condition is reached and then I hit this continue keyword, that means I skip the rest of the code and then I immediately go to the next iteration. So I continue the loop, but I'm skipping things, okay? Continues loop, but skips rest of current iteration. Okay? So let's say I wanted to only capitalize, let's say I only wanted to console.log the capital letters. I can say like, well, I'll just comment this whole thing out and I'll start over, right? Whoops. So I can write a for loop. I is less than hello dot length, and I could say if hello at I is equal to hello at I dot to uppercase, I'll console.log hello of I. Right? So now we get HWGBW. Cool, right? I mean, not really. This is so boring, but I'm just saying. Like, you could do like a bunch of things. It's just all like ifs and elses, right? So that's kind of like the general. That's the general stuff about loops, I guess. I don't think if I missed anything, I'll go back and show you guys. But let me just jump into this lecture and we could get started, right? So basically, the overview of this workshop would be we'll talk about while loops, the for loop, and the break and continue keywords. Yeah, so I pretty much hit everything. I'm going to skip debugging. I'll talk a little bit about debugging, but I'm pretty much going to skip it, okay? So the while loop, a while loop requires 3 elements, right? So it requires the while keyword, a conditional expression that evaluates to a Boolean value, and a block of code. So while, conditional, block of code, right? Everyone good on that? So the block of code will run over and over as long as the conditional expression evaluates to true. So as you can see here, we say let count equal 3. While count is greater or equal to 1, console.log count is count. Count minus minus. So what we get in the terminal over here would be 3, 2, 1, right? So here, while false, console.log, this line of code will never run, which is true. You don't see it over here, right? Because while false is not truthy, so it just never runs. This is never hit. So while true, we console.log, this line will run forever. as you can see, it literally does run out forever, or until your machine that is running your program runs out of memory, okay? This is what we call an infinite loop, and this is a gigantic bug, okay? It happens all the time, but like, because you might miss something. So, let count equal 3, while count is greater than or equal to 1, constant the log count is count. We have to make sure the conditional is eventually false, because as you can see here on the right, we still have count is 3, right? So, to make this false, what did we do before? We just did count minus minus, right? Cool. So, that's a while loop. So now a for loop requires 3 elements, right? The for keyword, 3 optional expressions, and a block of code. So the 3 expressions are initialization, condition, and final expression, right? So the block of code will run over and over until the condition evaluates to false. So it's actually the same as a while loop, right? It's just going to run until this middle condition is false. Okay? However, for loops are sometimes easier to reason about and easier to avoid infinite loops because you're making these 3 things immediately. You're not making them later and you might forget, okay? So the initialization is run first, then only once. It's often used to define a counter variable. Often. You don't have to do that though. You can do whatever you want with these things. It's your stuff, it's your program. Then before every iteration, the condition is checked to see if it's true. If it is, the for loop will run another iteration. Then, after each iteration, the final expression is run. So, as you can see here, for let I equal 1, this is run first, right? This is run first and only once, and then we check, is I less than or equal to 3? What if I did I is less than or equal to 0? Then that means that this would never run, right? If I change this to a 0, that means this would never run. Because the first thing we do is we make I, then the next thing we do is we do this check. Is I less than or equal to 0? It's not. I is greater than 0. So this would never run. We immediately break the loop, okay? And then after we run constant log I is 1, we increment I plus plus. So now I is going to be 2, and so on and so forth, okay? Any questions on this?
Question. Can you talk about are there situations where we should use a for versus a while loop, or can they pretty much do the same thing all the time?
So pretty much they do the same thing. They're just looping. They are just looping, okay? Some things, however, so usually I'll tell you what I do, my personal preference, right? Usually I use for loops if I'm iterating through strings or if I'm iterating through arrays, right? If I'm going in order and doing something, right? I use while loops when it makes sense. I can't really give you an example in my head. There is one in the workshop that I think makes more sense to use a while loop. It just depends on your problem and how you think about it, right? So how you think about the actual solution depends on what you're doing. Because usually with while loops, in my opinion, it's just easier to, if you're messing with the iterator, if you're messing with I, okay, now we want to increment it by 2, now we want to increment it by 5, now we don't want to increment it, we want to do this thing again and then change our input before. That's when I use while loops, when I'm getting really in the thick of things. Usually I don't like doing that with for loops, but that's just personal preference. You can do while loops, you can never touch a for loop if you wanted to. And vice versa.
Okay, for both loops, we have initialization, condition, and final expression. But in a for loop, we can just write those 3 things separated by semicolons. If we're doing a while loop, we put the conditional in the parentheses. Then we have to write out the initialization and final expression in the statement, right?
Right. So you have your conditional here, but as you can see, my conditional before was true, right? So the final expression here is actually this break. You know? So that's what I mean. Like, you have a little bit more freedom in while loops. Like, you can kind of do whatever you want, whereas for loops are a little bit more structured. But you can kind of do some wacky things with for loops too that I don't really want to get into to confuse other people. But pretty much, yeah. So you have your true, and our initialization was this outside of the while loop, right? When we let I. You could think of it like that if you wanted to. But all of these things aren't required.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Can you? This is a little bit off topic, but can you just say the name of the software again that you were coding in?
It's Replit.
Oh, this is just repl.it. It's just a website.
REPLIT.
Yep, it's right here. You see it? At the end of today, at the end of like when I break you guys out into breakout rooms or whatever, I'll be posting this in the Slack, and you guys can look at my example. Will that be helpful? All right, cool. Cool. What am I doing now? Okay, cool. So you can also loop in either direction, right? So like let I equal 5, I is greater than or equal to 1, I minus minus. Because I minus minus is just the same, is just the opposite of I plus plus, right? So as you can see, we start at 5 and go down to 1. Same thing, right? Nothing too crazy, nothing too scary. Then we have for loop over here. We can increment by any number as well. And I showed you this before, right? When I added 37 at each time for no reason. I is equal to 100, 200, 300, right? We set I to 100. We go until it's less than or equal to 300, and we add 100 every time. So you can do whatever you want, right? Use for loops to iterate through a string. I showed you this too. So let letters equal A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So we say let current letter equal letters of I inside of our for loop. And then we just do console.log current letter. So you see A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? Because the way you do this, though, like, well, the way you do this is you set I to 0, and you're adding 1 to I every time. So it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So, and we know that string characters are separated by numeric indices. So you can use the for loop to go through each character in the string. So when I is 0, we get letters at I, letters at 0, which is this A. We increment 1, letters at 1, which is the B, so we get this B, right? And so on and so forth. So the continue keyword will cause the loop to skip to the next iteration. Okay, so for let I equal 1, I is less than or equal to 5, I plus plus. If I is 3, we continue. So as you can see, there's no 3 in here. We continued, meaning we skipped the rest of the code. Once you hit the continue keyword, JavaScript skips the rest of their for loop iteration and just does this. Skips to the last part, I plus plus. Skips all of this, just does that. Does that make sense? Cool. The continue keyword also works in while loops. Yeah, so break and continue work in both while and for loops. They're specific to loops, okay? So as you can see here, while continue is greater than or equal to 1. If count mod 2, does everyone understand what this is? The percent sign is the modulo operator. So what this does is it returns the remainder if you did division, right? So when you do what I'm checking for, if count mod 2 is triple equals 0, what am I actually doing? I'm saying, is count even, right? Because if you divide a number by 2 and there's no remainder, that number is even, right? So this is a very quick way to check if something is even, okay? So if it's even, we will say count minus minus, and then we will continue. And then we do, if it's not even, if we never hit this, we just do console.log count as count, and we do count minus minus. But you see, I had to do the count minus minus in 2 places. Because if I didn't do it here on line 6, and I just continued, then I would never hit this decrement over here, so the count would be stuck at 4. Like when the count is 4, 4 mod 2 is triple equals 0, so we continue. And we skip this. So then we just check 4 over and over again. So you have to decrement the count in here if you're going to continue in a while loop, right? Just be careful with that. So the break keyword is, it permanently breaks out of the loop. So while true, myGrade plus equals 1. If myGrade.length is equal to 3, break. So the grade starts out as an A, and then we add pluses to it until the length of that string is 3. Once the length of that string is 3, we break out of the for while loop, and then that's that. Okay? So the break keyword also works in for loops, like I said before. Yeah.
Whatever. Why did we need count twice for the console log?
So
I mean, if we already had count in the first parentheses, why would we need it with the console log?
So like,
Okay. Conditional. Initial variable.
so if I mod 2 is equal to 0, right? So this is if it's even, right?
Yeah.
Let me just do this. Okay, so if it's even, I will say continue. Right?
Yeah.
Outside of this, if it's not even, I'll just console.log oddboy I, right? And then I will do I
Continue.
plus plus. So,
Oh.
if it's ever even, will I hit this? I will never hit this incrementer, right? So that means if it's even, I'll continue to the next iteration of the while loop, but I never changes. So we actually have to do I plus plus here. Then we continue. We have to make sure we are still changing I. Does that make sense? Otherwise, you will hit an infinite loop, and I'll show you, right? Nothing happened because we start out at, if I change this to 1, because 0 mod 0 is, you see it's still running, right? Nothing's showing up though, because we're not console logging. Like here, I'll console.log. Ah, you know what I mean? Because we're never changing 2. Once it's 2, once we increment down here to 2, 2 mod 2 is 0. We console.log infinity, we continue. That means we skip all of that. So we skip where we increment I. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's why we needed an I plus plus here as well. No, I don't need this anymore. Does that make sense?
I think so.
It's a little confusing to use continue keyword in while loops for sure, because you have to keep track of like 2 separate things. You know, you have to increment it in 2 places like that. I do agree with you; it is a little confusing, especially for people who are beginners. Like, don't sweat about that. But I would just if I were you, I would just avoid using continue in while loops in general. Like, I never do that. You know, so like, just yeah. So yeah, that's that. How's everybody feeling? Any questions?
So are we about to move into practice problems or
Yeah. So, bear. Just give. Can you guys just give me like 5 seconds? Just give me 5 seconds. I just have to look something up. I'm just trying to look up when your break is going to be.
Hey,
Hey, Marco. It's at 1.
Oh, it's at 1?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the schedule says 1.
Okay, dope. Okay, so you guys will have like 2 hours to do these workshops. Okay, so I'm gonna open up the intro workshop for you guys to do, but that's not what I want you all to work on. I want you all to work on the loop workshop. Okay, so let me just make pairs real quick. View pair. 1 second. And I'll stop recording.